Hey guys, let's continue where we left off. So at this point we need to define the DB driver, DB host, and DB name, plus DB user and password. So I'm just gonna grab these. Let me not even use that. Let me just go to the config file. So on the config file, this is where we define this stuff. So all the constants are defined here. Now you can put some comments like this and say database, something like that. Oops, I'm supposed to use the slash. Okay, so there we go. So let's define a few of these. So I'm going to define DB driver. So the driver here is MySQL. You can use Postgres, MySQL, or even SQLite, depending on what database you want to use. Then there's DB host. There's DB name, the database name itself. All right. So here we know DB name is YouTube_clone_DB. And then the host here is localhost. And we have, driver is MySQL. That's good. We need user and password. So here, user and pass or password. Now our password is empty string. If you're using a Mac, this could be root. I mean the password and the user may both be root, so try that. Now at this point, if you were asked a username and password when installing MySQL, that's what you put on the username and password situation here. So when you're deploying this online, you're going to be asked to enter this data. Username and password. So that's what you're gonna need to put here. These are the defaults in XAMPP. All right, now that we have that, it should be able to run this. Okay, great. Now at this point, if everything goes well, we shouldn't see an error. And let's go to our index page and actually instantiate this class and see how that works. So index page, down here, I'm just going to say DB is equal to new. Now this one is inside the core namespace and database like that. Alrighty then, let's see. We do have that namespace. That's great. Alright, so if everything goes well, we shouldn't see any errors. So let me refresh the page. And let's hold on there. And no errors there. So which means everything went accordingly to plan. Now let's do something wrong here. I'm just gonna edit any of these, maybe the DB name, something like that. Let's see if we get an error. Okay, so we don't get an error, so which means something isn't working right. So in our exception here, let's see, this function here should be named public because the constructor is always public. And let me see here. When we do have an exception, this is the data type, just like we write string or array or something. But there's a specific data type, PDO exception, which I would rather we use so that the error is more specific. And then here when it dies, I want it to die with an error from PDO itself. So I'm just going to say there's a function inside there called getMessage. Now if you, here we can say something like could not connect to the database with error, or just say error. Could not connect. The shorter the better. And then we say error something like that. All right, that way we have, oh, I need to put a dot there to concatenate. That way we can see the actual message, the error message. There's get message, and then there's also the code if you want to check that. If you want to know everything you can use here, just do a DD on this E. That way you get to see all the options available, but get message is what I need right now. Okay, so with that in mind, let's try again. Let me refresh. Okay, so I'm not getting any errors here, which is strange. Let me go to the view page source. I just want to see that, because sometimes these errors do hide as part of HTML. So I'm just looking at the page source here to confirm, and everything seems honky-dory. Now, let me just echo something here, just to make sure that we are getting through here. Let's see if we're gonna get that, and we don't get it. Okay, so something is terribly wrong here. Let me cut this. Let me paste it rather here. That way I know that this page is being loaded. Let's refresh, and nothing. So that page is not being loaded. Okay. Oh, is it? Let me go down here. Maybe it's at the bottom here. No, not even at the bottom. All right, so what I want to do is, let me remove this from here. Let me do this inside the home controller here. Right there. Okay, let me try it over there. And let's refresh, because I'm sure we're running through that. Okay, that didn't do anything either. Let me remove this. I'm trying to get an error here. Actually, let me remove the view file here. That way we get a clean page. Let me refresh. So this is the process of debugging. You have to use all your tricks up in your sleeve to find where the problem is, in case there is a problem. Now, at least finally I get some error, but let me put it back to normal here. Let's see if we get any errors then. Alright, so we don't get any errors when so everything is fine, I guess, apparently. The only problem I'm facing here is I don't see any code here. Okay, so there is that echo here. Let's paste it here. I'm just trying to be sure that we are in the right place. I need to see it again. Okay, there we go. So it did make a connection, which is great, even though we added the... Oh, I didn't save that. That's why. Sorry, my bad. So the new database name wasn't saved in the file. This is why it was still working. I want to see an error here. Okay, still, even with that, we're not seeing an error, but it's possible that it's connecting without the database itself. So let's just put a wrong username and password. That is sure to give us an error. Okay, there we go. So it says access denied, user, wrong user. So if you see this, it's saying uncaught PDO exception. This should be caught because we have a catch here. So why wasn't that caught? So try and catch. So when there's a PDO exception, it should be caught right here. Okay. Alright, we'll get back to that in a minute. So for now, at least we can see some error when something goes wrong, so that's fine. I'm gonna fix this momentarily. So let's undo that. Let's leave it to be okay. Everything is good. What I want us to do is create some functions here. So these are gonna be excuse me, public functions, right? Public function, the first one is insert. We have to be able to insert let me do this. I just want to put a bunch of these so that we know where we're headed. So there's insert, there's update, and then finally there's delete. Like that. Okay. And what am I missing? It's CRUD. So there's create, update, read. Okay, so there's read as well. Now, in order to read, we'll have two of them. Sometimes you want to read just one line. So we're going to say fetch. Okay. But then you may want to read all the lines that were returned. So in that situation, we're going to do fetch all. Like that. Alrighty. Okay, so that seems good. Now, when we connect here, we have to be able to run a query. Now, we're going to use prepared statements. So let's make a query function. We're going to use prepared statements because we don't want to be hacked using SQL injection. For those of you that do not know what SQL injection is, when running queries, because queries are actual strings and you add values in those queries, let's say for example when you say if ID read a row where the email is equal to, you specify your email, right? When you tell somebody to sign up and you give them an email box, they may not put an email there, they may put some actual code because they know that eventually that code will be part of your query, and then they'll put it in such a way that it can manipulate your query into doing something you don't want to do. So that's how people hack websites using SQL injection. Now, to avoid that, what we do is we prepare the query first, and then we add the values later. That way the system knows that the query ends here and the values start here, instead of it being just one string. So here, I'm going to need an SQL string there, a query string. So we're going to call it SQL. And then, what do I need here? I need the data. So this one is usually an array. Sometimes it can be empty, like that. So we are supplying the values separately of the query in an array, and then the query itself will be here. So here what we do is, the first thing we do is prepare a statement. So we're going to do, now the connection, once we make a connection, we are saving it in that variable. So that's where the connection is. So that's what we are running here. So I'm going to say this con, which is that connection over there, prepare. So using that connection, we are preparing our query. So we'll prepare that SQL statement. This will result in a prepared statement. So we're just going to call it something like that, right? And then we just want to return the executed query. So I'm just going to say return statement. That statement that comes out of the preparation, I guess. So once we do a preparation, we're going to, I think since this is query, let's execute the query. So I'm going to do statement, let's do this and say execute. Now when executing, this is when we add our array of data. Instead, let me just say data. It's much better there. All right, so we execute the data. Great. Now once we run that query and execute, then we return the statement. Now the reason we're returning this statement is I want to be able to do something like this. So when I'm trying to run a query, I'm going to do something like db is equal to new database, right? That way we create a new database. And then I can say something like db and then say query. And then here I supply my SQL. But then because I'm returning the statement, I can join these like that. I can run another thing here called fetch, for example. Now fetch is this function we're making here. I can also do fetch all if I want, which is this other function we're making here. Now the reason I can, what do we call this? It's called chaining. The reason I can chain this like this is because the result of this evaluation here is an actual statement from MySQL. And because with a statement I can do fetch like that, right? It means even the result of this function, which is a statement, I can chain another function to it, because that return this thing here does have a method called fetch and another fetch all, like that. All right, guys, so hopefully that will make some sense eventually once we start using them. So let's return the statement. So in certain situations you are updating a row, so in that situation you don't expect any result. That's why we've separated the fetch and fetch all functions from the just running the query. Certain queries do not have results. Now if you want, let's see here, fetch and fetch all, insert. Okay, we're gonna adjust a few things later. So now fetch itself is going to run like this. Let me move here. So what am I doing here? Okay, so let's go to one of these. We will deal with the fetch a bit later. So let's do the insert. So when we're inserting, what do we need? We need the table name, because database is going to deal with the whole entire database. So that's a string table. And then we need a list of key value pairs of the column names and the values that we're going to be adding to the database, because the database is just like a table with columns and values. So the column names are keys, the values are the values. So this one will be an array of data like that. Those are the two things we need. The update is a little bit more complex, so let's move to the delete in this case. So here we will have a string for the table name, and then when we are deleting, we need to tell it where we are deleting, like where this, like delete from database where ID is equal to 2, for example, right? So we need a where statement, which is a string as well. Okay, and then after that we have we need values for that where statement, because we don't want to add our values directly to the query. So we need an array of values. So these ones we're gonna call them where params, right? Where params. This could be an empty array if there are no by default. So whatever, let's say here we say in the where clause we say where ID is equal to 2, then in the where params we're supposed to add that ID key and then a value of 2. Then we can combine them here. Now similar to, oops, what have I done? Similar to the delete, the where clause also, the update, sorry, also requires a where clause. So I'm just going to copy this because it's very similar. The only difference is that with an update, we also need the actual data that we are going to update, which is an array as well. So I'm going to say array data like that. Otherwise, the rest of this remains the same. Okay. So now what we need to do is create a query that matches an insert query. That way we can run it if we need to. Okay, so here we're going to say, what do we do here? I need the keys and the values, because an SQL, let's do this, SQL is equal to, this is how an insert SQL looks like. You say insert into, and then the table name, let's say users. So insert into users, and then you have open close bracket, and then values, and then open close bracket. This is how an insert query looks like. And here you name your columns. For example, ID, name and email. But then, because we're using prepared statement, we don't want to put the values here, because normally we would put the values that correspond to the ID, the name, and the email. But in this case, we're going to put full colon ID, something like that, and then full colon again, name, and then comma, full colon email. Okay, this is going to be our query. And then we will supply the actual data in that one, and then we'll run this query, something like this. We're going to say this query, like that, okay? This query, and then we'll supply that SQL we just created. Now, since we're inserting, the connection itself is going to tell us what was the last insert ID. That's what we're going to return here. That way, when the ID is 0, you know that nothing was inserted. So, this, where is this? Query runs the connection, and then we return the statement. Okay, let me hold off on that one for a sec. So this query, let's just return that. Return this query. There we go. Okay, so this is going to run this function here, the query function. Now the query function requires array data as well there, so let me do that here. I'm going to say data. There we go, and that should run that. Okay, all right, and execute that statement. So that's one done. But the problem is, this is a we need to generate this query based on this data here. So let's do that. Now what I'm going to do is grab all the keys from this data and put them here, and we can do that by saying array key. There's a function called array keys data. So all it's going to do is grab the keys and create an array based on those keys, not the values of the array, but the keys. And so what I need here is just to implode or add them to this section here. So I'm going to do this to concatenate an implosion here. So implode, what that does is it collapses an array into a string. And then here you get to specify what character will be used in between those values, and that's a comma. Actually, I shouldn't have done this. Let me do this. Let me make a copy here so that we have reference, right? Let me do that. Let's do this, doop, and then implode, like that. So the glue here is the comma, because there's comma in between these items, and then the pieces themselves are keys. That's the array that we are imploding in between here. So here we make an implosion, and it will result in something like this, but with dynamic values, whatever values are here. Now we're going to do exactly the same thing here. The only difference is that between here there's a comma and also a full colon, right? So exactly this. So I'm going to copy that. Let me copy that and paste it here. Only difference is that after a comma we'll put a full colon. That way we have this scenario here. But because implosion only adds that middle, this is going to be only in the middle. So the first item will not have this. So what I'm going to do is put it there like so. Okay, the last one doesn't need one, and that's it. So that's how you create this this query. But also we shouldn't forget the table name, because we're not going to only be inserting in the users table. So I'm going to paste that there like that. Okay, so that creates our query. Great. Now let's go to the delete, because that one is easier to do as well. So our SQL in this case will be similar. So our query is something like this: delete from users, where let's say something like ID is equal to ID. Okay, Maybe we can say something like limit 1 or whatever, but maybe not. And then we're just gonna run the query just like we do. So I'm gonna copy that and paste it here. Okay, so in this situation we're gonna exchange the table. So let me duplicate that. Okay, there we go. So delete from table where, and then there's a where. Now this is a string, the where clause. So we can just put it here directly because it's gonna have something like this. So where, that's great. But then we need these where params. So we're just gonna transport these guys into here because we don't have data on this one. We just have these guys. So SQL, this is gonna be like delete from table, which is that table, where, and then maybe it's ID is equal to ID, and then the params will be in here. So simple and straightforward. Great. Let's go to the update function. Now the update function is similar, but the query goes something like this: update users set, and then you name the columns one by one. So let's say, for example, ID is equal to, and then because we're using prepared statements again, we're gonna use variables like that, and then comma, and then we say something like email is equal to email. So update set that this is equal to that, this is equal to that. Now you can put as many columns as you want, but then you still need a where clause, right? Where, maybe where are you updating, because you need to know which rows in particular you're updating. So there will be a where clause, and like I said, the where clause is a string, so we just add it like that. But then we need now to worry about params for the where clause and params for the actual data. So we just need to combine these two because they will all be part of the query now, and then execute that. So I'm gonna copy this part and run a query on that. So let's run that query with an SQL, but the array, we need a new array. So I'm gonna call this one array like that, and the way we'll get that array is to combine two arrays. So luckily there's array combine as it states here. No, actually it's not array combine, it's array merge. Array combine does something else. Yeah, so there's array 1, array 2, and so on. So the first array is data, and the second array is the where params. So we need to combine those two and then send them through like that. Hopefully I haven't lost you here. The reason we are combining these two arrays is because one array contains data for this section here where the actual data is, but then even in the where clause we're going to have things like where ID is equal to ID, for example. So this is still part of the query. So, and these values like the ID, the where part, are going to be in this array here and not part of the data. But since they're still one of part of the same query, we just need to combine those values into one array and send it through. Alrighty guys, so hopefully that wasn't too stressful and you have learned something. Now we're going to come back in the next video and clean this up a little bit so that we have more information once we run a query. For example, the last inserted ID and how many rows were affected by a particular query. And let's do that in the next video.